Oops, I guess I got some sugar in this. Wait, you guys, the croquembouche pages are stuck together from all the sugar from when we made it. My sister called me after the croquembouche episode and was like, Claire, there's sugar in my entire kitchen. The pages are literally stuck together. Hey everyone, I'm Claire. Welcome to my home kitchen. Today I'm showing you a recipe that I make all the time that I really love. It's my honey tahini challah. Challah is a traditional Jewish bread. It's a little bit sweet, but it also is just a delicious thing to have around. Great for toast, French toast, and it's really fun to make. Challah is an enriched bread, so that means it has eggs and a little bit of sugar added to it. The major twist in this recipe is that I add tahini to it. Tahini is a sesame paste, and there's already sesame seeds on top, and when I tried this recipe, I sort of was like, well, let's see what happens if I add some tahini to the dough. And it contributes great sesame flavor. I mean, it's subtle, but you can really sense it in the background. And it also creates a really silky texture to the bread itself. It's a recipe made totally by hand, great for novices, and really impressive. I've braided a lot of challah, and I go with just the simple 3-strand method. So if you know how to braid hair, you can braid challah. If you don't know how to braid hair, I would say watch a YouTube video, although I'll go over it. So, sorry.
You're already here.
You don't know what I mean. It's like, I guess I can't teach people how to braid. It's not that hard. So no special equipment. I'm doing the whole thing by hand. It is an easy dough to work with, so there's no need to use a stand mixer and the dough hook. You could if you like. I have a mixing bowl, sheet tray with some parchment paper, a spatula, a pastry brush for the egg wash at the end. That's really it. Ingredients, I'm using bread flour. Then I have a mix of 3 yolks and 2 whole eggs, plus an additional egg for brushing on top of the dough before we bake. Olive oil, sesame seeds, for the sprinkling over top, tahini, honey, active dry yeast, kosher salt, and then some water to help proof the yeast and bring it all together. So I'm going to start by mixing my dry ingredients, which is really just salt and flour. So this is 4 1/3 cups bread flour, 2 teaspoons Diamond kosher. If you're using Morton kosher salt, do half that. I'm using a combination of yolks and whole eggs, and that's because yolks create a really rich, delicious bread. Olive oil is my fat of choice for challah. You could use vegetable oil. I've seen it made with butter, although usually with challah it's something called parv, which means for people who keep kosher, it's nice to have no dairy in the recipe because then you can have it with meat, because you're not really mixing them. So using oil instead of butter. I like olive because I like the flavor, and then honey. I love the combination of olive oil and honey. The first thing I'm going to do is proof the yeast using active dry yeast, my go-to, the easiest kind of yeast to find. I'm going to proof this in a 1/4 cup of warm water. Now, if you have doubts about your yeast, add a couple drops of honey to this mixture and you'll be able to, that should encourage it to puff and foam, and then you'll know if your yeast is alive. I know that this yeast is alive, so I'm really just dissolving it here. One thing I've started doing is just adding the yeast directly to the dough. If you are really confident that your yeast is alive, you can skip this step and add the liquid to the rest of the recipe and the yeast to the dry ingredients. I have a 1/2 cup of additional water. I'll add my yeast mixture. That is yeast action, so I know that this is good. I'm gonna add my yeast mixture. Then everything else, my 3 yolks plus 2 whole eggs, my olive oil. It's 1/3 cup of olive oil. I'm adding a lot of other fat in the form of the tahini, because there's all that sesame oil in there, so keep in mind that the tahini is also a source of fat and richness. So when I measured out the ingredients for this last night, first I measured in this measuring cup I measured out the olive oil, and then I poured it into a container. Then I had already had oil coating this measuring cup, and I used that for the honey. And I do that intentionally because having an oil residue in the cup allows the honey to slip right out, and it makes it really easy to measure, so you don't have to then sit there and scrape out every last bit of honey. The whole thing just kind of like moves out of the measuring cup. So I recommend, even if you're not measuring out oil first, you can give it like a little spray with some Pam or something. I didn't oil this container, so see how it's clinging to the sides. Right, I should have oiled this. Although it is sort of sliding out a little bit. The measuring cup was oiled, this thing not so much.
Basically, that's what you're gonna eat.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting way to look at the recipe. So basically, ingredients.
That's the
Going
food.
to become food.
Honey quality varies wildly from brand to brand. So this is kind of a local honey from the Catskills that has a really strong, delicious, concentrated flavor. This is the sweetener for the whole recipe, and the more flavorful honey you have, the more you're gonna taste it in the final bread. I just wouldn't go so far as to use a chestnut honey or something like really, really strong like that, because it'll make it a little bit bitter. But just it's worth buying a high quality honey. Like a farmer's market honey is a good one, rather than just the, the generic bear at the grocery store.
Good for allergies.
Good for allergies?
The local pollen, yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay, so treat your allergies homeopathically and support local honey farms or bee keepers. There we go. I got there eventually. So I'm just mixing all this together. Just breaking up the eggs and the yolks. You don't have to make it super smooth. This goes into my bowl of flour. The honey is really dense, so that's settled to the bottom. Make sure you scrape all of it in. I'm gonna take my spatula and now just start to incorporate the flour into the liquid. We want to bring together the ingredients into a dough. Honey does crystallize, but you can just warm it and it will melt and come back together. Never grows mold, never spoils. Apparently, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've read this before. Honey has been found in the tombs of Egyptian pharaohs, and it is still good, which is mind-blowing if you think about it. So once you have everything come together, scrape it out onto your work surface. I'm gonna sit here and knead it until I have something smooth and elastic, and if it becomes really sticky, I'll just add more flour. Essentially, the dough has been greased because of all the oil that I've added to it. Okay, so kneading technique. I use both hands. I have my feet slightly apart, one in front of the other, and I use that so I can have sort of a rocking motion. And I use my two hands, and kneading really happens with this fleshy part, like the heel of your hand. Everyone has sort of their own technique, but for me, and what I think is sort of standard, is a kind of pushing away motion with the heel of your hand, and then using the other hand to help fold and repeat. And the dough sort of rotates as you work. So fold the dough over, I fold it toward me, and then push away with the heel of my hand. Then I give the whole thing a 90-degree-ish turn, fold, push away again. And so having my feet a little bit apart helps me to gain a little momentum as I knead. But that's the basic motion. And so you'll see, like, I'm getting a little bit of stickage to the surface. And that's when you can add a little bit of flour. It might also be sticking to your hands, in which case, add a little flour. But you want to be here for a little while. We want to really work this dough. So I'm at the state where I probably don't need to add much more flour. The dough is still, it's soft but not sticky. It's a little bit tacky, and I'll explain what that means. Basically, when you poke your finger in and you lift it out, the dough, see how it's right there? It clings to the finger, but then will release. It looks good. The surface is very smooth. I have that sort of loss of stickiness. That's another indication that you have kneaded it sufficiently. So I'm going to let this rise now. I have a large bowl. I'm just gonna oil the bowl very, very lightly. So I have a little extra olive oil here. The dough itself, I'll give a slight slick, but in general, it's not sticky. So this is the shape that you want it in for rising, and I'm gonna put it inside the bowl. And now I'll cover it, and this should sit in a room temperature or slightly warm spot until it has about doubled in size. And actually I just have a swap, so we're gonna do that now. So I made this dough and I stuck it right in the fridge, and it rose a little bit as it sat in the fridge, but generally that cold temp slowed the activity of the yeast. So it's been sitting out for a few hours. You can see when I poke the surface, and it's cold, so the dough is firmer, that there's air inside. So when I press down, the gas inside, like it springs back, and then I leave a slight indentation. It is basically doubled in size. So now I am ready to portion the dough. You could make one giant challah with this, but I think that more appropriately is to make 2 medium-sized challah. I could weigh it to make sure that I'm portioning out 6 even pieces. So I'm doing 6 pieces, so each is a 3-strand braid. But I don't really feel like getting my scale out, so I'm going to eyeball it. There's a lot of air in here. I'm gonna end up deflating it as I form the strands. The dough's nice and light. From each half, I'm gonna do 3. So I'm just sort of flattening this and working it into a rectangle shape. And then I'm going to sort of roll it up to a little log. If I were to go straight from here into a strand, it would be a little bit wrinkled, a little bit rough, not super smooth. So this pre-shaping, this is just something that you can do to make a really professional looking braid. The dimensions are up to you. It's about if you want a long, skinny braid, a sort of more short and squat braid, but I'm gonna go with 2 slightly squatter loaves so I can make them side by side. So I have it positioned seam side down, and then you start in the middle of the strand with your palms, applying downward pressure as you roll and lengthen. And I like to actually do more of a tapered piece of dough where the edges are a little bit thinner and the center of that strand is a little bit thicker. I have a little bit of a seam right here, so I'm gonna position it seam side down. In general, I have a nice smooth strand. I'm gonna transfer that to my baking sheet. Then I'm gonna keep rolling with the remaining pieces. Remember to pinch that seam so it doesn't come apart as you roll. And if you feel like your pieces of dough are not extending and they're shrinking back as you roll, let them rest a little bit longer. Now, everyone's method of braiding is a little bit different. Most commonly, you'll see instructions that say pinch all the ends together and start braiding from one side straight to the other. I find that I can achieve the most visually pleasing and even braid by actually starting in the center and moving in one direction, then turning it around and braiding in the other direction. You have the middle strand and then a left and a right. You start by taking from either side, I'll start with the left strand and crossing it over the middle strand so that now you have the left goes into the center. Then you do the same thing from the alternate side, so the right. The right crosses over the center, and that becomes the new center strand. Left crosses over center, becomes the new center. Alternating, the right side does the same, crosses over. You see challahs where like the strands have fused together and it looks more like a loaf. If you want to prevent that from happening, you can coat them in a little bit of flour. So as I braid, I am tugging on the pieces of dough and creating tension to braid something really tight. So I'm going to keep going just from this side. And I get down to those little thin ends and pinch together. And then I like to tuck. So I take the edge of the braid and I just tuck it under itself. And I have this sort of beautiful finished look. And then I sort of push it up toward the center and make it a little thicker. Okay, so now I'm going to repeat that same process going in the opposite direction. And instead of crossing over, I'm going to go under. And that's going to make the same pattern of braid to finish the strands. So turn it around. Instead of crossing over, I'm going to cross under. And that's going to basically braid it in the same direction in the opposite way. If you're more comfortable braiding the way that you know, which is maybe just starting from one end and going in a single direction, then go ahead and do that. I would say, it's like my mom says when she's talking about directions. The way to go is the way you know. Do whatever's most comfortable. But this is just the way that I find I make the prettiest looking braid. I push in from both sides just to make it a little shorter because it's kind of long. And there we go. That's our braid. So I have my 2. They look really good. These are going to expand quite a bit. Now I want to cover them and let them rise a second time. With active dry yeast, we're always going to do 2 rises. One that's called bulk, where it's the full amount of dough all at once. And then after we shape them, the second rise. The rise is relatively slow. It's a little sluggish. It should take maybe an hour and a half or so. And then I'll egg wash, top of sesame, and bake. Well, they're gonna be huge, and probably should have put them on 2 trays. So I knew I should have put them on 2 baking sheets, but I didn't, and I did it anyway. One of my signatures, but they'll be fine. So now before I put them in the oven, I'm gonna do a little bit of an egg wash. I should just say that these took a while to rise, and we all got very sleepy, and we just lived out my dream as an adult, which was to take a nap while I'm at work. So I just wanna say I took a 15-minute snooze, and I feel great. Taking this last egg, and go ahead and beat the egg till no streaks remain. So give these a little sponge bath of egg. I will say this is a relatively slow rising recipe, and I'm not sure why, because there's plenty of sugar in the dough, but if yours is taking a while, I promise you it will rise. Just let it go longer. You probably did not mess it up. These are going to expand in the oven, so any concentration of sesame seeds you have on there now will, like, they'll spread out. So I go really heavy on the sesame. And this is white raw sesame hulled. Nothing will stick to the dough without the egg wash. So it creates shine, but it also gives the topping something to adhere to. My oven has been preheating to 350. I'm going to bake these. I'll rotate the baking sheet 1 time, and it'll go for about a half an hour. And I am just going to bake them until I see a very deep golden brown. In they go. About a half an hour, 30 to 35, and I'll check it after about 20 and give the pan a 180 rotation. I let these fully cool. Your bread is done when you tap the underside and it sounds hollow. I realize that's not a great test because you don't really know that, you can't really do that test until it's cooled. So at that point, if it's underdone, you can't bake it again. But that's just to reassure you that it is done. It's fully cooled. I'm going to slice into it. It's actually traditional to tear challah rather than cut it, but I want to get a clean slice, so I'll show you what it looks like. You can actually see a little bit of the swirl in the dough, but it's really light. It has this great kind of pull apart, almost like it forms threads or shreds, if you see what I'm talking about. So that is a texture that I like, and it has such a great softness and silkiness that I think is partly attributed to the tahini in it. Now the scent, it's a little bit redolent of sesame from the tahini, but it's not like a punch you in your face. When I've brought this over for people to try, they sort of taste it, and they're like, what is that in the background? So I really like the subtlety of it. It contributes a lot in terms of flavor and texture. And this is just, I don't know, I feel like I grew up eating not very good challah. So it's a real pleasure to eat something with such a great texture. I mean, at this point, Dessert Person the book came out 6 months ago. And which means I wrote the book going on like 2 years ago. So a lot of these recipes I haven't made in a long time. Hey everyone, I'm Claire. Welcome to my home kitchen. Today I'm showing you a recipe that I make all the time that I really love. And it's such a pleasure to revisit them and be reminded that, oh yeah, it's really good. I really like making it. It's a great version of what, you know, what the thing is. And makes me feel good about myself. Plus it's super tasty. So I hope you give it a try. I think you'll find that a little bit of tahini in your challah is a great addition. And this is a real like Dessert Person kind of recipe. Classic with a little interesting kind of twist. So thank you for watching, like and subscribe.